because the two things I really work with my clients starting right out of the gate on is we've got to get control of our busyness, and we've got to really become curious about ourselves. The two work in conjunction. If I am so busy, right? And we can be busy from, I'm on my phone while I'm watching a Netflix, while there's a conversation in the other room I'm listening to, right? Our fascination with sports and fun and all those things are good in balance. But what happens is they squash curiosity.
My guest today is DonJay Rice. DonJay is a financial behavior coach who helps individuals, couples, and families heal their relationship with money, especially when it's been shaped by stress, grief, or trauma. With nearly 3 decades as a financial advisor and advanced training in financial psychology, he bridges the emotional and practical sides of money. But what really defines DonJay is his heart. His work is a beautiful reminder that healing our relationship with money is often really just about healing our relationship within ourselves. Welcome back to Call Cut with Angélique. I'm Angélique, and today I have a wonderful guest. DonJay Rice, how are you? Thank you so much for joining me on Call Cut with Angélique.
Hey, Angélique, it's great to be here. Doing well. Looking forward to spending time with you.
Yeah, so let's get right in. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started.
Okay. So I'm what they call a financial behavior specialist, which usually when I say that, most people go, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah,
Um, s-
I didn't either.
so I work with clients where there's a financial behavior that just needs to come back more in balance. It could be spending, it could be hoarding, couples fighting about money, parents that financially enable their children. Just widows' anxiety is a big thing around finances. Anything like that. Sometimes clients come to me with a question mark. They just know that there's something off about their relationship with money, and they're not sure what it is. And so I'll work with them on just kind of a discovery process with that. But yeah.
That's a really interesting business to get into. How did you even start? Where
Yeah.
did this idea come from, right?
Yeah. So for me, before I was a financial behavior specialist, or sometimes just calling it simply what it is, a financial behavior coach. Um, Before that, I was a financial advisor for about 28 years. And and what was interesting was I discovered I started as an advisor in 1995, and in 1998, I had a kind of a culmination of events were happening. Of course, the internet was really coming online, right? Where most people
Yeah.
knew what it was and started dabbling in it, things like that. And the same time that was happening, I had 3 clients that were widows, or 3 clients that their husbands all passed away in the same month, which was big. And I remember inviting the widows into my office, and we went through, the estate paperwork, and I'd always been a big believer in both couples, both spouses need to be present in the meetings and involved in the decisions. Um, but we went through the paperwork. I kind of updated on the accounts, and within 2 weeks of each account where we got everything kind of finalized, the account transferred out of my office. So that's
Wow.
like 3 in 1 month roughly, right? And so,
Yeah.
um, so at first, probably what's natural for all of us, we wanna blame, right? And say, "Well, these people must have been all in Lions Club together, and they all talked," and I looked at my notes, they weren't in the same clubs, they didn't go to the same church, they didn't live in the same neighborhoods, um, and the accounts all transferred out to 3 separate firms. So then I had to take a good hard look in the mirror and say, "There's only one common denominator here, and you're staring at him." And so and so at that same time, of course, the internet was coming on, and before that, E-Trade, all those things were coming on. And before that, if someone even knew what they wanted to purchase as far as a security, they pretty much had to come through a financial advisor. And so at that same time, I was kind of wondering, like, what's all this going to look like? And as I kind of worked on discovery of that and discovery of what was I not giving these clients that they needed, I realized I wasn't allowing emotions in the room at all. It was all mechanical. It was all these things. And as I come to realize that, I'm like, DonJay, if you don't change what you're doing, you will not have a business. Like E-Trade, if all you are is an order taker with no emotion and not allowing emotion and experiences and all those things. And so that had started me back in 1998, a change on that business model that I was doing, and just continued to refine it and get better at it. And then decided here a few years back to sell my firm and just focus strictly on financial behaviors, because I felt like there was so much more I could do in that realm that I literally didn't have time to do when you're studying the markets and asset allocation and all these things. So yeah, here we are.
Wow. And it's so interesting because I believe that people have a calling and the calling will find you, you know,
I fully
even,
agree.
yeah, even when you try to dodge it. I think so many of us sometimes try to dodge it. We're like, "Oh, no, no, that's not it. That's not what I'm doing." I know I had that my experience myself. So how does that work? And I love one of the things you said at the top is you help people with all aspects, excuse me, of emotional financial ties. And I think there's a lot people don't understand about that. I know for myself, I had that with my biological father. It was a very unhealthy relationship to money through the two of us. And we probably could have used someone like you to do a major intervention because he was paying back for years of abandonment. And then it just turned into this really dysfunctional sort of, and on both sides, right? Not just him,
Sure.
both sides, the giver, the receiver, and then control dynamics. And I find that people do get trapped. Like, do you find that people talk about that a lot, like feeling that sense of being trapped?
Oh, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I was working a while back with a client, and he couldn't quite describe what he was feeling, and he had actually been in theater for a number, like decades, and was really good at it. And I said, so I thought I need to mix this up, and so I said, well, if this was a play right now and you were acting in this play, what would you be acting? Like, act it out for me. And we're on Zoom, and he literally like grabs his throat and said, and I'm like, and he's acting like he's choking. And he says, money's suffocating me. Right. But it
Yeah.
was the one thing that kind of broke all that open. Right. So yeah, I think all of us, what's interesting, Angélique, is I find that money is just like sex. In that growing up, right, there were all these, if you think about sex growing up, there were all these messages and things that were inadvertently communicated, just all these things, right? And but no one ever sat us down, right, and said, okay, here's the class, here's what this is, here's what this isn't, let's clarify all these mixed messages you're hearing, from whether it be friends or society or parents or the billboards on the interstate, right? And the thing is, we have all this misinformation in us if we take that sex thing a little bit further, and yet we all think like we're good at it, right? and we and we know all about it. We know all about it, and we're good at it. And the same thing happens with money. No one, probably very few out there, right, were sat down and said, "This is what it is. This is what it." Here's all the messages we're hearing that are
Yeah.
incorrect. And yet we all think like, well, we should know all about it and we're good at it. And then we figure out after a while that we hit that wall, right? Whatever it is. And I've usually found that it's that second or third go around where clients will come to me and go, there's something going on, right? The first go around, we usually dismiss it, right? I got
Yeah.
a little too much on the credit card debt. Maybe I was a little too controlling with my children using money, and we just dismiss it. And then it's that
Hmm.
second, but definitely that third where you're like, whoa, there's something here. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I like I like your analogy because there are many things in our journey that we think we know that aren't really communicated to us in a way that we can process through our traumas and our dramas and in all the different ways that it may come up, because family dynamics are all different. They're, depending on what you're born into,
Yeah.
depending on, I noticed for people that were, well, the middle class is not really a thing anymore, but when it was, people born into the middle class striving for more, people who are poor striving for more, people who have money or certain levels of wealth trying to maintain status quo, but not necessarily striving, which is one of the things that can happen. I see in generational wealth, where
Yeah.
if that wealth is not built upon, it's very easy to vanquish it in, what is a third generation, the first
Yeah.
generation that builds it, right? Kills it by the third.
Yeah.
So I think it's so interesting that this is what you're doing to try to help people get a hold of it, because regardless of how we feel about economics and capitalism, et cetera, money does rule the world. And our relationship to money, it's like our relationship to food or our relationship to sex, whatever that is, we have to get a hold of those storylines and figure out what they are in order to have a healthy experience with them.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And you were mentioning about the different areas of wealth. I was just working with someone the other day, and that was a child of some very wealthy parents that came to me, and so um, doesn't want to work, doesn't want to engage, right? Doesn't want to move on to adulting, as some people would call it. And as we continue to delve into that, he interpreted money from the standpoint of his what his parents did to get it, which was workaholism, some business deals that he, right or wrong, looked through a childhood lens and said, I don't know that that was quite on the up and up, right? And so his message was like, if this is what it is, I don't want it. And, but
Yeah.
it's getting that out, right? It's doing that deep discovery work inside of us to go, why do I believe this? Right? Why do I feel this way? And that's what I do, is walk with those clients to have that curiosity within themselves.
I find that interesting because the one thing I know a lot of artists come up against um, is poverty consciousness associated with this idea that they have to earn their keep, they have to pay their dues. And it's, unless you're born from into a super wealthy family and you have a little nepotism going on, it could be very hard for artists to break into certain industries, especially when they carry that sort of narrative with them,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Oh, I have to pay my dues. No, sir, madam, you don't. Not at some point. If you have had your experiences, you have to change your relationship to money, and people don't think they deserve to either charge for their art or for their service. And conversely, you find people who are not qualified for anything who charge more money than you could possibly imagine. Right?
Yeah,
You're like,
yeah, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, there's so much to take apart there, but you'll find business owners that may not charge for really beyond they're charging below market rates. You ask them to discount, and they're disc offering huge discounts and apologizing even then. And
yep.
sometimes that's a money message, that from parents or society, that money is evil, right? Um, and so, and with artists, what's really interesting, I also do an Enneagram coach, and so I use the Enneagram in my
Oh,
coaching. Yeah, and so when you find artists, usually they fall into an Enneagram 4, typically, right? Not always, but the kicker is, they can believe that they're, which it is, right? Their talents, it's this gift, right, that they've been given. Like, I've been incredibly gifted, whether it's on the stage or whether it's doing artwork itself, painting, whatever, sculpting. I've been incredibly gifted, and I just want to share my gift. My gift, as I share that, is showing the world how I love. Right. So then it becomes
Yeah.
this conflict of, wait a minute, you mean am I charging for my love? Am I charging to share my love, my gift? And so helping, but a lot of times we don't know that here again, because money is this thing that we don't talk about. And yeah, I can balance a checkbook. That's all, of course I'm great at money, so it's really discovering how it's intertwined into our lives, into our beings, that can really help us then untangle that and walk with money in a healthy, balanced way.
Yeah, and that is something a lot of folks would love because, the understanding of money, I think, from a very Western perspective, is having that hyper capitalistic view that
Mm,
you have to hustle and grind and
yeah.
hustle and grind and keep up with the Joneses, whoever the hell the Joneses are. I mean, really, these guys. Like, get lost. Um, but they keep up with these, these beliefs or these fabricated images of success that, in fairness, were created, right? In order to get that American drive, especially that drive to do more, more, work harder than everybody else. And it becomes, I feel, it creates a toxic relationship to money because there's that love-hate relationship that you have with money. You love to have it and hate to have to bust your ass to get it. And what a lot of people, we were talking about this the other day, people who sell their soul to the devil, if you, so to speak, especially in entertainment industries. Well, they're doing that for money, not
Yeah.
just for fame. And in more money, really, more than anything, right? So here, we're going to make you famous and put you in the public eye, and we're going to give you access to unlimited funds, but you will owe us. We need money to survive, but do we live to make money? And I wonder if there's a toxic kind of relationship between those two things.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, when our self-worth is solely or mainly dependent on our net worth, right? There's a problem. There's a problem. And I think you're exactly right with Western civilization. I remember years ago, I'd done a lot of mission trips, and this was a mission trip down the Dominican Republic, and it was away from the resorts. It was inland, it was jungle, and the first day they sat our team down, and the head missionaries there said, do you believe that you saw the drive in, do you believe the people in this community are wealthy? And of course I raised my hand like, yes, absolutely. you know and I think people looked at me and said, but you're a financial advisor, like, I guess I shouldn't be investing with you. But the key was, right, it gets back to, I think it was Edward Young's statement, wealth is a state of mind, right? And
Mm.
so, and what was so beautiful from that, Angélique, was my family went with me, and my oldest daughter, she was probably 14 at the time. They had her write when she went back to school in the fall, what did you do for the summer? And she wrote about that mission trip. And she wrote about how she saw the Dominican ladies down by the river washing their clothes in the river, that, of course, the same cattle were upstream. And so, beating their clothes on the rocks, and how they were singing joyous songs, right? Which comes back to
Mhm.
wealth is a state of mind.
Right? And it comes back like everything. When we start to realize that the mind really does create everything, it absolutely is responsible for our projected reality. But then I feel like that's hopeful for people, right? Who have a disadvantaged story with money, let's say, or their belief systems surrounding money are not leading them to their highest and best selves. That means that the work you do is putting them in a position where they can learn a different story. They can start to create a different belief that then they can energetically attach to. And once we know that once, quantum physics says once you start to attach to that reality is the one that is going to manifest, right? We need emotion. A lot of people don't realize this, Donjay, is that they think they have a good relationship with money. And I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, right? And then suddenly something happened. Well, not even something happens, but they'll say things like, "Oh, well, I don't understand why I can't get this job or I can't get past that or I can't get this." Because I don't think people realize what's running behind the scenes. And do you find that a lot in your work that
Oh,
there's,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
subconscious stories?
Absolutely, we've got background messages running. Um, and they're constant at us. We have we have what do they say on average? We have 70,000 thoughts a day. You know, well, if you sat someone down and said, "Tell me your 70,000 thoughts today," I mean, you'd be like, you'd get a look like you. And so, yeah, so we have these messages that are just running in background, and I had them. We all have had them. Um, and the thing is, I think, Angelique, is the two things I really work with my clients starting right out of the gate on is we've got to get control of our busyness and we've got to really become curious about ourselves. Right. And the two work in conjunction. If I am so busy, right? And we can be busy from, I'm on my phone while I'm watching a Netflix, while there's a conversation in the other room I'm listening to workaholism, to whatever it is, right? Our fascination with sports and fun and all those things are good in balance, right? But what happens is they squash curiosity. And I have no time to be curious about myself and go, well, I feel this way. Why does Angelique feel different? Not saying there's a right or wrong answer, right? Just, I wonder what that is, right? Where does that come from? Yeah.
See, that's rather interesting because I would say that is why distraction was created, to prevent
Hmm.
people from truly becoming curious about their origins, and not just our personal, but then the collective of the human origin story. Why are we here? What are we here to do? Who are we? Why do we react to things that way? And that's even why when I do the call cut stuff, it's to go deep into those moments and say, why is this bothering me?
Yeah.
Why do I feel I'm not good enough? Why do I feel like this job isn't going to last or this is going to be taken away from me? I know, I used to think about that a lot. Things being taken away from me
Hmm.
because my early childhood, that's what happened. When my parents got divorced. So, right, the mind of a child, my father is taken away from me. And he cheated on my mother, and his mistress and her daughter took my father away from me. That is the story that I would tell myself as an
Hmm.
8-year-old. And so if we don't really, and I say this, and I know it's a bit crude, sit in our shit and figure out why do these things happen? You're right. We get caught up in the distraction, and the distraction takes us away from the discovery part of the human journey.
Yeah. And wow, we could talk for a long time. I'm just telling
Yeah.
you right now. But yeah, and I think that's the other part of like Western society is like, wait a minute, that's sad. Don't spend any time in that. Right? That could,
Right.
boy, that could overwhelm me. That could overtake me, which is a total lie. Right?
Yep.
But I don't want to sit in anything that's sad. And so if I start to feel sad, it also filters into my busyness or my ignoring and asking why and being curious. And so, yeah, I work when I work with clients, I say, not only we're going to look at past money memories, but we're going to look at any past grief or trauma event. And you immediately get a little pushback, or you'll say, "Well, I don't have any grief events." And I'll say, "Well, have you had any life transitions? The parents sold the family home you grew up in." "Oh, yeah." "Well, what did that feel like?" That was
Yeah.
a grief event, right?
That
So
is
we
grief.
yeah, so those grief and trauma events, what I've found is underneath them, if we'll sit with them, there's usually at least one money message that you're still
Mm.
running in the background of your brain, but it's been
Yeah.
buried underneath there. And that's where those big discoveries can lie. But here again, society has told us don't sit in the sad. And what's interesting, what's interesting is I did some trauma teaching. I held it, was part of a team that did a week-long trauma training over in Nigeria. Or no, I'm sorry, in Kenya, Nairobi, in Nairobi, Kenya. And so, what was interesting is I had never been in that country, and so I'm preparing my materials, and I'm doing some training on do's and don'ts of walking with someone in grief. And so there was another lady that was with me. I had lost my mother when I was 12. She died. And this other lady that was with me, she had lost her mother when she was 12. And so the team said, hey, you guys should probably do these do's and don'ts, you know. And and what was interesting as we prepared, I said, hey, what we'll do is we want to tee up this group to take notes, to ask questions. And I said, why don't I say one and talk about one point, and then you say one, talk about one point, and then I'll say, hey, that was really good. Like, I would write that down if I were you guys, audience, to kind of tag team,
Yeah.
right? And so we're all prepared to do that. And so I say my point, and you're kind of engaged, so you're not really thinking about the audience of how they're reacting. And then she's saying her point, and I'm thinking, okay, up comes my line of, hey, that was really good. Like I take notes on this stuff. And I turn my head to look out from having eye contact with her. Everyone's already got notepads out. And some of them are on page 2 of notes. So here again, it's that Western society of like, we can't talk about sad stuff. We can't talk about grief. That if we'll get out of our shell and we'll look around, there's a lot of other, Kenya being one of them, that says, no, sitting in our grief, sitting in our stuff, right, is not
Yeah.
bad. It's not bad.
No, and the truth is, the only way out is through.
Yeah.
People have this idea that they can run from it. I can run from my pain. I could run from my struggles. You can, but it chases you
Yeah.
because it's attached to you, right? So, I would say this to my son when my son's like, I can't. I'm like, when you spin around and you try to get away from it, it's going with you around and around and around and around. So, what you need to do is turn around and face it. And when you look at it and you truly look at it, you get a very different perspective about yourself. I think just having done a lot of shadow work and loving shadow work for some very bizarre reason. I can't even, I don't know whether it's because I have a melancholic nature to begin with. So much so it's actually in my birth chart that I have a
Hmm.
propensity toward melancholy. And I was diagnosed with congenital melancholy, which I thought was a fake diagnosis, but apparently not. The thing I
I'm writing that
real
down. I want to look that up. You've
yeah,
got my
look it up.
curiosity going. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a wealth of useless information. But what I learned is I learned to love, and this is going to sound weird, the sadness, because there is a part of empathy that is kind of, I would say, tied into that feeling of compassion and whatnot for other humans. And when we can feel our sadness instead of run from it, or feel our grief, beneath all of it, we find that it's because you have a high capacity to love that you feel this grief and you feel this sadness on a higher level. I have a friend and he's really cool and I really love this guy. And he also has this melancholic nature. And he's like, I always feel like I have this dark cloud following me around
Hmm.
on my head. And I said, oh, how cool. So you get it to rain on you whenever you want. And he's like, no. He's like, I don't have to rain on me. He's like, no, I just feel like it's like this general overall feeling that things are pretty grim. I said, well, I think that is you sense life in a certain way. And he told me that for many years he would numb it with alcohol, with drugs, with sex, anything that he could possibly do. And he said, and I remember one time you turned to me and you were like, well, why don't you just sit in it instead of get all those diseases and addictions, which is something obnoxious I probably did say in my 20s. And it's like, I thought about it and was like, because I'm scared.
Yeah.
And it's such an honest answer, right? Like, because I know that fear comes with that as well. The fear of looking at yourself and thinking you're weak, or maybe that you'll never get out of it
Yeah.
if you actually allow yourself to go into it until you realize that out of it is going through it.
Yeah. And doing that gives you more power, more abilities,
Yeah,
more gifts and love that you can give yourself and give to others, right?
that's right.
And I say all that, I want to make sure your listeners understand. I'm not preaching. I'm telling you from the person who probably messed up the most. I had a addiction to workaholism like you couldn't believe that started at age 12 and lasted until my 40s. Um, and it was hard to break, right? And workaholism is a money behavior. We can have different reasons we do it, right? But it was running from the grief of the death of my mom, running from the grief of childhood poverty, running from the grief of the disability of my father, all those things, right? And so all that stuff stacked up on me as a kid, and I thought, and then I found, workaholism kind of found me, and I was able to, like, this kid that mowed lawns and painted sheds and built, um, I mean, if it paid a buck and it was outside, I was doing it, and so,
Yeah.
and so, I got good at it. I got praised for it. It was a great way to just bury the grief. It got me out of poverty. It gave me money that I could buy my own clothes with. Um, all those things, right? And so it then became where it felt safe.
Yep.
And so then to
Yes.
ask someone to, like you said with your friend, well, why won't you do it? I'm scared. I remember going through therapy and I was, and I was the type, always had 30 things on my to-do list every day. Yeah. And then just totally bummed out if I didn't get them all done. And I remember the therapist I was with said, What if just for tomorrow, which was going to be Saturday, she said, what if just for tomorrow you cleared off your to-do list and you just, like, if you wanted to just throw a line out in your lake and go fishing, you did. If you wanted to just sit at the fire pit and watch the birds, you did. Like, you just gave that up for one day, right? So she's asking me to kind of lean into it, right? And I remember I just started crying. I mean, I was
Mm-hmm.
just bawling.
Oh,
And she's like, tell me what these tears are. And I said, I'm afraid of what will come in my head. Right. So fear is a big driver in our behaviors. And we don't even realize it until she made me say it. I mean, if you'd been like, why do you work so much? I wouldn't have known. Right. But then it's like, oh, this is it. Oh, yeah.
it's so interesting how all of these things are intertwined in a way that we
Mhm.
don't recognize. And workaholism, which I didn't actually think of that as being a thing. The same way I didn't think congenital melancholy was a thing, right? But it makes a lot of sense because you get caught up in the distraction and obsessed with the execution of that distraction,
Yeah.
which further distracts you from having to face all the things that are really the issue
Yeah.
or the things that would set you on your path to reach your highest and best self
Yeah.
because you're so hyper focused on this other little piece.
Yeah.
It's very
But what people
interesting.
don't realize, right, is that I always say emotions don't vanish when they're banished. They just fester
Oh,
and
I
come
like
out
that.
sideways, right? And so
Yeah.
I was doing all that workaholism and all those type of things. And so anything like that, what happens, right, is it's still underneath there. But it wants to come to the surface, right? It wants
Yeah.
to come to completeness. And so when we're pushing that beach ball underwater, eventually it's going to pop up. But it's going to pop up in some, right? It's going to like come out of our hands and it flies off to the side. Only that flying off to the side isn't a beach ball that lightly, taps somebody in the pool. It's usually some other action or reaction that then all that does is hurt the relationship. It gives us regret, all those things. So yeah, it's just,
That come in. Yeah.
yeah.
That's because there's always an equal and opposite force that's pushing
Hmm.
back when you're trying to push against something.
Oh
There's
yeah.
also an interesting thing about how the brain processes loss. The brain sees anything that it loses as something it has to get back. And
Hmm.
so when you try to lose these thoughts or lose addictions or lose whatever or lose weight, it comes back because the brain will seek to pull it back. If you release it, it goes away,
Yeah.
right? So when the brain thinks about loss, it says, oh no, I've lost something. I need to get that back. But when we say we're going to release this, we're going to release the need to feel this way or release in a strange way, the body and the mind understand release as the letting go. And that's, that's where we kind of find I wouldn't say our power, but in a way our power to to realign ourselves with something that is better for us instead of chasing this idea that I have to have this, 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 this. And then if I don't have that, I have to lose that. I can't do that anymore. Or same thing with can't. When you say, oh, I can't do that anymore. But then all these temptations come in to make you want to do that. There's very specific commands for the body and the mind, and release is one of them. I release it's something's hold on me. And so when even things like grief, once we've processed it, we release its hold. And then all these other things that you're talking about, the desire to work a lot, to numb the pain, to keep going, to just push all of it out. You said running away from the death of your mom. And I'm sorry that, you lost your mom early on. It's a very tough pain and we don't want to feel it.
Oh yeah.
We don't want to sit and say, so it is so busying yourself is the best way to distract from having to really sit in that emotion and release it, because the release also means you can cry.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot where I have a lot of compassion for men specifically when it comes to the releasing of emotion,
Yeah.
because many, many, many of them, especially in the older generations, were taught,
Oh
no,
sure.
men don't
Yeah.
cry.
Yeah. That's right.
I
That's
bet,
right.
right? You deal with that. I'm sure you hear that, you know, no, I'm not going to cry. No, that's weakness. And I feel like we have done generations of men a huge disservice with that particular storyline.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just there's so much there that you mentioned, but yeah, it's here again, it's men don't cry, you know. Um I remember when I was growing up, there was a song, Big Boys Don't Cry, and so we put a lot of that into our music,
Yeah.
Cowgirls Don't Cry, all these songs, that say that. And I think about, as you were sitting there talking about, feeling like you're being forced, so after my mom passed away, I have two brothers. They both have special needs, and so at age 12, my father brings me home from the funeral, sits me down, and says, "There's no way with his disability that he could cook, clean. There was days he couldn't literally get out of bed. He'd be heaving and gasping for air with his lungs. And so he said, today you are now mom. And
Oh,
so, yeah, you will clean the house. You'll help me cook dinners on the days I can't, and you discipline your brothers,
oh,
right? And so now here again, here again was some work to realize, I was angry at him for a while, realizing that it wasn't he didn't intend it to be this punishment. And so I had to do some work on that. But then, and then at age 20, I became their legal guardian. And so when there were times when I was busy in my life, which was a lot when you're a workaholic, there would be times they would need me, and my reaction would be anger, right? And so when I reframed that and said, yeah, back then, 12-year-old DonJay did not have choice, but he does today. So today he has choice. And yes, he loves his brothers dearly. He always has. And so today it is not being sat down at the kitchen table and told to your mom. Today you are choosing to, right, be the guardian for your brothers, to help them in whatever it is, X, Y, Z. And when you do that, it is like freeing, right? And so
Yeah.
it is just the most freeing thing. And then I would say blending in with that was the shame. So the thing that really helped me really finally release that anger for good was I had my brother was in the hospital and he passed away a couple months after that. And yeah, you could just tell we're getting there, right? We're getting to the end. And there was a social worker that was working with me, and I felt all this and I never said it. And she was talking with me, and I said, Melissa, I feel like I'm failing them. Well,
Hmm.
she had three children with special needs. And she said, why do you think you're failing them? She didn't answer the question for me. And I had to sit with that, right? And go,
Yeah.
why did I say that? Right. But it helped release the shame of she's like, whatever your answer is, she goes, I just want you to know I see hundreds of these cases. There is no way you're failing them. And then I
Yeah.
sat with that and recognized this was when my father said, you will take care of Aaron and Mark the rest of your life. You are now their guardian. Childhood, DonJay says, Dad does it perfectly. So therefore, anytime I mess up, right, I'm not doing it right, I'm failing. I'm failing. Somehow there was this childhood message that I interpreted, right? You've got to do it all right, keep them all healthy, do it all perfectly. Nothing bad will ever happen in their life, which is just total bunk, right? But that's sometimes how our childhood, but when we don't go back and sit with those things, we're like, oh, wait a minute, that's not
Right.
reality. Come on, right? So,
Right.
so shame and choice have a lot to do with freeing that stuff, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so much I want to say about this. Well, the first thing is that what a call cut moment that you did with yourself to be able to stop yourself from that, regret and
Yeah,
what's the word I'm looking for? Resentment spiral,
yeah,
right? Because what does a 12-year-old, and this is why the shadow work is important. What does a 12-year-old think when they look at this? A 12-year-old tells a very different story than a 20-something, 30-something, 40-something does. And
absolutely.
that's where I feel like we just got to let ourselves off the hook from childhood traumas, because that little person is doing the best that they can with the limited information that they have. And the senses that they're taking in the world are not things that are coming from wisdom. They're coming from society. They're coming from familial, like all of these different
Yeah,
ideas and beliefs that are imposed on them by other people. And they don't have the wherewithal. They don't even have the brain power. I mean, their brains don't completely form until 25.
right.
So you're talking about so much trauma to children, and if you never sat with that, what kind of regret, resentment, and as you said, shame do you carry with you on and on and on, that you never allow yourself the grace to let go,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
to see those people and those situations through the eyes of love, and which is a very different vibe when you feel like you're being trapped or forced into something.
yeah, yeah. And along the way, money is telling us all these messages as well, in that stuff that we've got to sit with and, why? Yeah.
Yeah. And well, what do we live for? We
Yeah.
live to make money. Most of us, right? We wake up every day. We show up at a job. A lot of us, some of us are lucky. We show up at jobs we like. A lot of us show up at jobs we don't like. Um, we work very hard to make a very small group of people very wealthy. And then we hope and wish and pray that our efforts will also put us in a similar situation. We're living in a society right now where it's becoming clear that that's not going to happen. It's actually trying to set us back. And that's a lot of stress,
Yeah.
and people start to realize, well, I may not be able to own my home. I might not be able to legacy my home. My property may no longer be my property. I may be renting it from somebody who owns everything. My business may no longer be, these are a lot of things. And because money has so much power in this particular world, we do have to acknowledge it as a part of our psyche and something that is contributing to how we show up in the world, our depression, our anxiety, our joy. You can see, money literally controls how people feel
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis.
Oh, yeah. 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 When I was a financial advisor, you know, I would see people out in the community and they're like, well, you're probably in a bad mood today, aren't you? And I'm like, why? Why? Well, the stock market was down. I'm like, please, I sure hope my mood is not controlled by a red or green arrow, right? At
Yeah,
the end of the day. Oh my goodness, right? And so, and like you say, just being able to reframe things, especially in this society, this economic environment that we're in. I was reading something just this morning about home affordability, right? And that's hit the news a lot here recently. And this person was just challenging, like, who told you that your identity was to be tied up in whether you owned a home or not? And I thought it was a hugely profound question for people just to sit with, like, who told you that you had to do that?
if your identity is attached to those things, we are in the danger zone because there is a delusion happening. And anytime that the bigger that delusion grows, the more the authenticity comes up against it to say, well, no, that's not really us, though. That's not really our situation. And you start to find people not getting called out, but the truth revealing itself in different ways.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, when you think about if we're keeping up this illusion, right? I may be able to fool the people on Instagram who, don't know me at all, right? But I'm not fooling the circle around me that's close to me. I'm not fooling my children. And so I mentioned earlier the
That's right.
person that said I want nothing to do with money because I saw those messages my parents sent. So what are you doing to your children by having that illusion that they're seeing through? You may think they're a kid and don't get it. They get more than you think they do. And they see more than the people on Instagram or the people you work with. And so what are you doing sending these messages to them about money versus,
That's right.
right? It's about love and it's about kindness and generosity. Yeah. So,
It's fascinating. I try to teach my son humility above all things because I do think that we are in not a generation, but we are in a time when narcissism is just at its peak. And more people are in this 24-hour pageant of look at me, look at me, look at
mm,
me, look at me, look at me,
yeah,
not necessarily offering anything of value to the human race as a whole, but trying to extract as much as they can from it and doing it in a way that can harm other people, harm other people's mental health, harm the way other people see themselves. And so I always have conversations with my son about the most important thing is really being there for other humans, even when it's hard, for showing up and being a ear, being a kind heart, having a kind word, doing random acts of kindness because there's enough of this me first, it's mine, and I'm gonna beat you, and I have more than you, and I'm prettier than you, and smarter than you, and all this kind of crap. And it's toxic. It's really weighing hard on our kids, and kids are committing suicide at younger and younger ages because they feel like they cannot keep up with this stuff, and their lack of esteem, and oh, I'll never be rich, I'll never have money, I'll never this, I'll never that, and they see this life that is projected onto social media that's complete and total bullshit. It's all smoke and mirrors, and when you start to break it all down, you realize that you, the person who's living your life and doing your thing and finding joy in every moment, is actually doing it the right way. In Buddhism, it's all about living that life without material, right? That you have figured out that, yeah, sure, I know how to use my finances. You said this at the top, integrating your finances into your life in a healthy way, but it doesn't become the obsession that drives you.
Yeah. Yeah. You made me think of a story of my two brothers. So Aaron passed away, and Aaron, had an IQ of in the 30s. So, definitely below the bottom 1% of the population. Lived on Social Security disability his entire life, and so, but was always happy. Was always happy, and could make anybody smile and had just the most intoxicating laugh. Well, so he passes away, and we have the showing the night, around the funeral the next morning, but that night's the showing, and it's in a small town. It's about a town of 60,000. He didn't know a lot of people. He knew the people at church. He knew the people he did Special Olympics with. Of course, some of my clients lived in that town, but it's a cold night in January. It's windy. It's a cold rain. I'm thinking there's not going to be a lot of people here. Aaron didn't know a lot of people. It's a nasty night. There's going to be a lot of people here. And so people were coming up, and of course, talking to me. Some of those were people that worked at the sheltered workshop or I shouldn't say work, but did activities at the sheltered workshop where Aaron was at Special Olympics, a Special Olympics coach. Up walks this lady, and she is short. She is older. She is frail. You can tell it's a task. It's a struggle for her to even walk. And she comes up and she says, "I knew your brother Aaron." She goes, "I was his Walmart cashier. And when he would come every Friday, I always worked, and I always waited on him. And he was always so kind to me. And I just wanted to let you know that." And I thought,
Wow.
and I mean, I felt like I was going to, I know inside of me, I dropped to my knees, and I just started crying. And I'm like, "I can't believe you would come." And she's like, "I can't believe I wouldn't." And I used to always think, um, boy, wouldn't it be great, like at my funeral, if the governor of the state came or so and so came, right? And after that, I was like, I just want a Walmart cashier. And I just want, you know,
Yeah.
and so if we can just put that in our brain, like, how do we want that to look? Well, I want someone to just come up and say, "He was so kind to me," right? Well, if I want it to look that way, now I can backtrack it, right? Okay, if I want to look that way, now how do I want to live so that actually happens, you know? And so, yeah, so it's one of those things. I'm so thankful for my two brothers that I had with special needs, because they helped me look at, and they still do, look at the world differently, look at people differently, understand things differently. And they were a gift, even though for a while I did not see it that way. So,
Yeah, but that's the beauty of life, is
yeah.
that oftentimes the gift is obscured
Yes.
by this inverted sort of reality that we live in, that it's backwards, and the way we see things is backwards.
Yeah.
This inverted reality that we think we should be chasing one thing, but it's really the opposite of that. And when we learn to find joy and kindness in the little things,
Yeah.
all the rest of it heals itself on its own. I feel that most humans are inherently kind, but I do think that they can be easily corrupted due to the things that we've talked about, the mind, being easily programmable. And if, you don't control your mind, someone else will. So you do have to take the responsibility for this temple and this avatar, and you really do have to go all in on it and sit with all of those things that may be frightening,
Yeah.
but you've got to face them. And there's people like you in the world out there helping people to do this and say, hey, I can help you get to the nitty gritty. I can help you get through that grief and help you align, in a better way with your financial situation. Do you have any advice for people who are struggling, or do you have anything, you could share with the audience, a tip or a trick to help them kind of realign? And of course, we're going to find out where they can connect with you, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, sure. So I would say the first thing is to try to start to think about what could I give up to create more space for my thoughts, to be curious. And it doesn't have to be like, we all have things we waste our time on. But for me, for one example was I love a perfect lawn. Like I just love it, right? And that's probably related back to my childhood of getting started mowing lawns. But so as I was really going through the depths of my stuff, I thought, what if I didn't have a perfect lawn for a year? I just had an average lawn. you know, like what kind of time would start? And I had to tell myself, I had to talk through myself, like, hey, DonJay, like, because at first it's resistance, right? Wait a
Yep.
minute, perfect. I'm going to give that up, And I had to tell myself, like, if you got it there once, you can get it there again, right? If you want that perfect lawn when this is all done, maybe you won't, but you can. So finding something to, even if it's just to give up or do less of for a season, right? And you
Mm.
may decide, like, I'm giving it up altogether, but to lean in as a way of leaning in, what can I give up for a season to create space? And then just become this non-judgmental detective of yourself. Why did I do that? Right? It's not rendering judgment like it was bad. You're just asking why, right? So starting to journal, like, boy, when that guy came into my office, like I lit up quick into him. Why did I do that? And not a why for, yeah, he could have said something, did something. Okay, I got that, right? But I still have choice over my responses. I still have choice over my feelings. So why?
Yep.
And so I would say just slowing down, um, starting to let busyness lose that death grip on you, and just starting to be curious from a very non-judgmental way. And start to do that about our money decisions. Yeah.
I think that's really great advice, Donjay. Is there a place that people can connect with you?
Yeah. So I'm my website website my website is drumbeatofwealth.com. And so they can go right into there and look around and contact me through that. I'm very active on LinkedIn with my name, DonJay Rice, and they can DM me through that. And then also I'm on Instagram under Drumbeat of Wealth and Facebook under Drumbeat of Wealth.
Well, I am so happy to have had you on Call Cut with Angélique. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours.
Same here.
Uh, so thank you. And I hope that, the audience really does connect with you. I think you have a lot of, a wealth of information, I should say. And you have a great path to helping people achieve their highest and best self.
Yeah, there's a beautiful path and a beautiful life out there for us. And we just need to go get it.
Thank you so much for joining me on Call Cut with Angélique. New episodes drop every Friday. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share with your friends. And remember, folks, no matter what life gives you, you must always keep shining.